Hello, welcome to the Mammas series, the misunderstanding of multiplicity. My name is Maria. So I did a longer than life video on a little more truth regarding multiple personality. And I just wanted to say a quick correction. I made a mistake. I meant to say 1880 and I said 1980. I actually meant to talk about 1880 and 1980 when talking about child abuse and laws for women, and then concentrate on that timeline that I've been talking about since 2007 that matters as to where the misconceptions in media come from and why suddenly there was more repressed memories and trauma work being done in the 80s, and how that developed from women's rights in 1975 to 1980 when that all became more mandated, reportable, and policemen started taking really a phone call more seriously too, and the authorities did. So there really were laws on the books for if a child was abused or if a woman was abused. There were laws, but as laws evolved in different states, there weren't any concrete, really good solutions. Early social work was really the church. So many times if a child was neglected in the late 1700s, 1800s to 1880, when finally there was a actual reportable case, which I'll link to, that nobody could turn away from, and then it became on the books. But before that, really, children just were brought into the charity foundations of the churches that ran social work, because the church was community social work, and the nuns and the sisters and the priests, that's what they did. So they had schools for boys, schools for girls, orphanages, convents that people could go to for safety, for pregnancy, for all kinds of things. So I keep wanting to talk about 1775 to 1880 that was important, and then 1975 and 1980 that was important. And I will come back and do a short little blurb and just read it from the darn book that I keep talking about, and it will make more sense. But yes, those of you that have corrected me a million times, I keep saying 1980. Sorry about that. I mean to be saying 1880. And then 1980 mattered. Alright, so I thought I would do a video today and talk about Navajo knitting. Okay, this is something I've always done, but I never knew it was called Navajo knitting. And I just happened to be at a knitting circle where a lady was actually holding her yarn in a way that my dad's mom used to hold her yarn when she crocheted or knitted. She would pin her yarn to her apron, I believe. And sometimes I would see her yarn around her neck. And it wasn't until I actually went to go spend time with her for a week when I was not well, I was sick, and I stayed at her house, that I asked her, how do you knit? She said, come sit, watch. I can't explain it, watch me. And I thought, forget that. All I saw was her thumbs moving, and she was going so fast. I was like, what are you doing? And I went to a knitting circle and saw a woman knitting just like my grandmother, and I nearly jumped across the room. I was like, you're doing what my grandmother did. Yeah. And she was 81, and she said, yes, this is Portuguese knitting. And I said, my grandmother wasn't Portuguese. I didn't. So she told me a couple of good links to go learn about it. And she told me a little bit about it, that it kind of came over into America from the Mediterranean states of Greece, Italy, Portugal, Lisbon, all these countries, Spain. And it has the name Portuguese, but many nationalities used it in the Mediterranean. So it would be natural to see my Italian grandmother knitting that way. And I came out to look up videos for Portuguese knitting to try it because I get a lot of pain in my shoulders and my neck, and it really goes down into my mid back when I'm knitting. Sometimes like this, I'm doing all this, and if I'm continental or Mediterranean or speed knitting, I'm really just it is more of a shoulder workout. It's more of this. It's more of like, especially when you're purling, it's more of this constantly. And this, what she's doing is more of a like this. She's not moving her shoulders all around. She's not moving her arms. And it's just much nicer on your fingers, your wrists, your elbows, everything. Which, if you sit wrong, you're knitting, you can feel it everywhere. Believe me. So I've taken to standing up when I knit or crochet, except for when I'm doing video. So I ran right into a video that came up in the auto that said Navajo knitting, and it was Vicki Howell's video, and it's a great video. She does a lot of accessories and tells you how to bust up your stash of yarn, and that's what I've been doing. It's August. I want to get rid of all these little odds and ends that I did projects with and I have left over before I can actually save my money to buy what's on sale to knit and crochet for Christmas. So, but with Navajo knitting, you can take a lot of your scrap yarn and mix and match not just the colors, but the weight of the yarn. So Navajo knitting, which I always call just mixing my yarns, was developed for lace type yarn, like crochet thread, or lace, or sock thread, or a really thin 0 to 1 kind of lace. And basically what you're doing is you're chaining up long chains and you're making one strand into 3. Okay, so let's see. I have to take this hat apart. I made 2 of them and I'm taking one apart. So this is a number 6 yarn. Okay, and it's called Purple Passion. I found the band from it, and it's Vanna's Home Choice, number 6. Okay, you can use any yarn to do Navajo knitting, and you can use all different colors. I'm going to use this one to show you how I'm going to mix this into this color. And I'm going to show you how, hopefully, with crochet and knitting, how the different looks you can get from using lace. So I'll just begin with a ball of Red Heart Aran. It's their value. It's on their lower end, but it still is a good yarn. It's nice and soft, but it's acrylic. When you're working with one strand, it's going to be a 4 worsted weight yarn, but a little softer than their value yarns. But it's not going to be like a thick, bulky, when you touch it, it's luxurious and nice and all. But you can make it that way by, instead of holding 2 balls or 3 and pulling that way, which I always get tangled when I do that, you can make a slip knot. I'm going to do right here, and you just elongate, just widen that slip knot a little bit, and let your tail fall, and pull the strand through. Maybe pull one more strand through. This is how I do it anyways. And then I turn, I take my tail and I turn this way, I hold on to my slip knot, and I pull this way. Okay? And now I have a loop here. Now I begin doing this. And typically in Navajo knitting, people pull about 14 to 18 inches or 16 to 18 inches. I go as long as my arm will go. And that's about it. And then you just then you have 3 strands of yarn. So remember, this is a 6 yarn. So now I'm working with 3 strands that will become a 6, and I'll show you how that works out on a crochet hook, and you can do it on a knitting too. I'll show you those. Well, I'll show you what it works out good for. Is in knitting, if you wanted to increase your stitches, you would either knit into the front of a stitch and the back of that same stitch, or knit into the back of that stitch and the front of that same stitch, or purl into the back and the front of the same stitch, or the front and the back. Or you could make one to the left or make one to the right, or you could yarn over. If you yarn over, you're going to get a larger space, which is used mostly in lace work. So you have those spaces. When you knit into the back and the front, or the front and the back, or purl into the front and the back, or the back and the front, there's still a little bit of a space. So generally people like to fill in, because it's a nice gentle way to fill in the space by going down into the stitch in between 2 stitches and picking up a vertical bar and working it. But you'll notice with all the big statement pieces that are so popular and the yarn is so expensive for, and the knitting needles are really big for, that many of those patterns don't have a lot of increases or decreases or actual stitch patterns. When you see people knitting with these big yarns that they're selling in kits, very often it's just the knit stitch, and they're sometimes knitting in pieces and sewing it together. Because it can get really hard to get underneath those stitches, so I'll show you what I mean. So I found a way a while ago to, I'd say, to increase and decrease using the 3 separate strands instead of just as one stitch. So I'm going to cast on 4 stitches, maybe 5, I don't know, I don't remember. Let me do a few so it works out. Okay, so what do I got? 7, that's a good number. Okay, I'll stop there. So now right here is the end of my loop. I'm going to just pull some more yarn here. This is really just a great way to, you don't have to get all tangled up in your yarn, which I can do very easily. Which is why I named my channel Biatch and Klutz Knitting and Crochet, because I'm klutzy. Okay, so if I just wanted to knit this, I'm going to keep my tail out of the way and just treat this as one stitch. And I can get onto those 3 strands fairly easy. And just knit across. Okay. And I'm going to purl my way back because I just want this to look a little, I want to give it a stockinette look so you can see how it works out. And so just remember to, when you turn, to straighten out your yarn. So now I'm going to come into the front and wrap around this way and purl. Now you will see knit and purl with the big knits, those quick big knits with the big chunky, super chunky yarn. You'll see knit purl. But you won't see a lot of increases and decreases, maybe a couple, but that's about it. It's very hard to do, to get under the thicker yarn. And I'm going to knit this row. I'm just doing a simple stockinette stitch, which is knit 1 row, purl 1 row, knit 1 row. Okay, so I'm going to end on a purl row. and show you how you would increase, and you can see how that's working up to a really thick, beautiful yarn, and it's just as thick as this, just as thick. So instead of spending a fortune on maybe 1.5 ounces of those quick, super bulky ones that are all the rage right now for the big statement hats, big statement scarves, big statement cowls, big statement sweaters. It's everything. Big statement rugs, everything. What can I show you here? Okay, this is another thing to think about. It's fun to knit on the number 50 knitting needle, but just for a reference, this is a size 13, a 15 millimeter. You're talking about a 50. It's big, so just think of how big that yarn is around it and how heavy those are to work with. Well, they're usually plastic, but I've seen some of the wood ones too. So this is a way to do that without having to get all that stuff. You don't have to get all that stuff. Okay, so when we increase, we usually go into the front stitch and into the back stitch. And you can see how that can be a little bit tough. It's doable, but it's tough with the thicker yarns, and especially if you want a Navajo knit. So what can you really make but straight things, right? I was going to knit along. And then just to show you what I mean, if you wanted to make one to the right or the left, you would have to take this needle, your left needle, and go down into this vertical bar of this stitch, either into the front and lift it up onto your needle if you're doing a make one to the right, and then, oh no, wait a minute, this would be a make one to the left. Okay, I'll explain that better in a minute. When you make one to the left, you're going into the, I'm going to not do that. I'm going to show it again. If you make one to the right, you're going with the left needle from the back into that vertical bar, lifting it up, and then you're coming down here and going into the front and knitting that, which is really tough to do. As you can see. Okay, I'm not even going to do that because I don't want to ruin it. Okay, if you're making one to the left, you're going to come to the front and pick it up and go into the back. That one's a little easier to do. But you still got to get underneath those 3 strands and the thick yarn. And a yarn over would look really obvious as an increase. So I'm just going to knit the rest of these and show you what I came up with that instead of increasing that way, and having it being a really unpleasurable experience. Okay. You could treat the strands as stitches. Take 2 strands or 3, any combination, as long as you stay the same combination once you pick it. I'm going to pick 2 strands here. I'm going to pull some more yarn. Tangled here. I could get in there. I have a knot. I have a split stuck to. Okay. Split a yarn. Alright. Pull this through. Pull this through. Right. And straighten that out. Right. So I'm actually going to knit 2 of the strands, and then because each stitch is 3 strands, I have 1 left here, I'm going to pull one stitch over from the next one. Or you could do every other. You could, I mean, let me pick a pattern that over. Yeah, 2 and 2 I'm going to do. So I'm going to treat 2 strands as a stitch. And those are 2 right there. And 2 right here. So instead of, you can see how that's increasing there. So just pull a couple strands away and go underneath 2 strands instead of 3. I think I may have had one there and split. I think it'd be easier to show if I just increase one side. So I'll then go into these stitches as normal. Okay. So you can see just getting underneath those stitches is a little bit tough. So if you wanted to make an actual pattern, you begin to increase and add more stitches on. I'll just spread it out so you can see it. You just go into the strands, treat the strands like a stitch. Like I could separate these, maybe increase for 2 rows. That one didn't work. Put that back up there. And knit it. And I'm just separating my strands and making actual stitches out there. And you might think, well, how does it increase it? And wouldn't the yarn, wouldn't it look thinner then? No. It's going to look like you changed your needle size and actually add variation and texture. It will look like you're actually doing a stitch pattern. So because I'm only trying to increase that one side, I'm just doing that one side. Just to be able to show it better. I'm going to slip that one. Okay. So you can start to see it increasing here. But if I had to go, that was a little tough, but not, it's tolerable, it's doable. But if you wanted to increase and really, make an actual pattern with a thicker yarn by doing Navajo knitting, you could just use the strands. That's what I'm saying. Just pull through, keep pulling through. Okay. And that works up to be a very thick yarn. And it comes undone very easily. Some people preset their yarn and pull it all ahead of time. I don't really do that. I'm going to set that aside for right now. And show you really what this was created for, was for this kind of yarn. Now, what I wanted to say is, if you wanted to work in different colors in your Navajo knitting, all you would have to do is when you get to the end of your loop, go ahead and connect another color and work that through and just keep looping that. So it's just loop over loop over loop, like everything with crocheting and knitting, it's loop over loop. So I've already preset my one strand of yarn, and I want to show you, this was a pattern I was starting to work on for an idea for curtains. And I've really been playing around with different stitch patterns and crochet patterns for some valances. But when I got done with this, I thought, it's a little thinner than I wanted. And I know it's not blocked even, and when it gets blocked, it's going to be even thinner. If you want this pattern, just go to mammastitcheryprojects.com. Mammas Stitchery Projects on YouTube or on her website. This is called an asymmetrical shell, and it's an original design, and it features a chainless foundation where you're working into loops instead of working into the actual chains. So instead of working into all these little individual chains that are in here, you are crocheting trebles and connecting them, and you're working into the loops as your first chain, which is much easier when you're working with something this thin. So if you want this pattern, just go there to get that. But if I wanted to, I can't do the asymmetrical pattern here because it's a copywritten. I can't show how to do it. You have to go and get the pattern. But let me just crochet with this and show you how very different it looks. So I've decided I want to do that pattern, but I'm not going to show you that pattern here. And I'm using an H hook, 5mm. So if you wanted to bump up your lace work just a little, which is what Navajo knitting was made for, this is perfect for coasters, for doilies, runners. Tablecloths is perfect for. So let's say I just want to do a double crochet in each loop. I'm going to show you how very different it works up. And all you're doing is changing the weight of the yarn. But it takes on almost like a drop stitch kind of look because the strands are in there. It looks like you did something very intricate, but you didn't. Looks like you really took a lot of time and effort to do something funky and cool, but you didn't. You just bumped up your yarn. Okay, so you can increase, decrease by using the strands, and then you can also just make it much thicker. Let's say I wanted to just do a shell in one, just for the heck of it. With a chain in between. I'm going to do 2 more. If I wanted to make curtains and I want them to just have a little bit more oomph to them, sturdiness, not only is this a mercurized yarn, but it's bumped up from Navajo. Navajo, well, it's made for knitting, but you can use it for crocheting too. So I'm just double crocheting 2 and then chaining 1 and then double crocheting 2. It's sort of like a V stitch, but it's kind of a shell too. And then I'm single crocheting in the next, and then making a loop. I'm chaining 1, and I'm skipping 1 and going into the next one. So I'm actually going to be going into the turning chain here. And I skipped one. I have to learn to put my glasses on before I do these. And I'm going to go into the same space. Make another double crochet. Same space. Chain one. And do 2 more. And it could be any pattern you choose to do. Actually, that didn't work. I went into the wrong spot. Ah. Okay. Oh, I know what I did. Okay, I have to go into the whole thing. There we go. I missed a strand. Okay, and then 2 more. I'm going to chain 2. Well, I'm going to chain 3 and turn. So you can see how much thicker that becomes. Really, really thick. And I mean, I think if you're working on a curtain or whatever, you want it to be a little bit. By the time you block this, it's going to drape more thinner. So it works up really cool. But what's even cooler is knitting with it. If you like, I'm using a 5.5 needle here. Or am I using 5.5 millimeter? And watch how pretty this turns out. Because if you like Victorian or the era of the 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s, this is really a beautiful way to get that look. Is bump up your needle size. Maybe 2 sizes because it's a 5.5 and you would normally be using like a 2.0 maybe or 1.75. This is much bigger. And then I'm just going to knit those. And it's going to look a little droopy in areas, and that's okay. The first row or two looks a little wobbly. Then once you get going, it's going to have the look you want. Because it'll drape and fall down. Okay. Right now, if I just was to pull right here, you can already see you're getting some lacy action going on. I'm going to show you how you can, if I get a little bit more going here, change your needle size to make it look like you did a smaller stitch when you didn't. And you can maybe do one row where you knit up onto a maybe a 3.0 needle or a 2.0 needle, and it'll bring it up and tighten it, that loop, and then you can, it would be a little bit tough but not too hard to wiggle in with your bumped up needle and go for that drapey again. So it's an irregular stitch, but you got to get a few rows of this going before you can do that. And you can even throw a purl row in, now make it more drapey. So just by making those big chains and pulling your thread through, like I did with this one, that's what you do with this one. You can see how it would drape down really pretty. Okay, but say I wanted to really change this up. Could use a really thin one. And come along and this will look weird at first. I'm going to put these two together because I got a loop that's hanging off here. Hang on one second. Oh, that, you know what? Yeah, I had one that fell, so I'm going to knit it together. Should I put my glasses on? Okay. And you could do strand work, like you could pick one strand if you wanted to increase, but not only that, but if you wanted to give it a really look of a real delicate look, and it'll look like you did something you didn't do. You didn't do anything special for. Let me stretch that out so you can see it. So you can see how when you block it, how much drapier it looks. And now if I go back onto the big needle from here, you'll see what I mean. So you can play with this by just changing up your needle sizes as you go. And working individual strands. I'm going to go into the back of that one. I'm not going to fight with it. In fact, I'm going to go into the back of the ones in the middle. Just to see if it looks different. You can make up your own patterns, you know. You see how that brought it down now? And I dropped a stitch there, but wait, I'm going to grab it. Okay, it's better. See how it kind of went up and then down? It's got kind of an irregular, fun look to it. If you kept going back and forth like this, you could have an irregular look or not. But knitting or crocheting, it works fine, and it just makes it a little sturdier. So again, Navajo knitting was created for lace yarn to make it thicker. So if you're making curtains, or I think this would work really good being mercurized for placemats, coasters, really like grown-up coasters, dressy, formal coasters, wedding coasters, shower coasters, those kind of things really would work good. And then again, this yarn here is a number 4 worsted weight, but we worked it up knitting, and you could do it crocheting too. So I know I'm going to rework this pattern with my mercurized yarn that's pink Navajo looped, or what I call mixing my yarn. Now, one more I want to show. So I want to show you how you can mix your colors too. I want to cheat this color. But what I have here is Caron Simply Soft, a light 4. Anyone that's worked with Caron Simply Soft knows it's a really light worsted weight 4. It's an ombre, currant raisin, violet, and lilac, so it's purples. When I first looked at this, I thought, it's not going to work. But if you Navajo knit it, and you get your 3 strands together, it does work. I'm going to show you how close I can get to this. How close I can get to that color. So you really could bust up your stash of yarn by mixing your colors, by doing patterns, using your strands, increasing, decreasing, without killing yourself, or bending your needles like I did. Okay, so I'm back to my 5.5 needle. I'm just going to knit across just to show you a few. How they work out. I've already pre-set this because I know I want to bust up my stash, so I've got a few balls of yarn that I've already preset, although I prefer to pull yarn as I go, because I don't like to commit to keeping it all that way. And you can drop down to single strand knitting and change up your weight in the middle of it and get a really cool look. I want to show you how finding a color that's variegated, or an ombre, or long self-striping or short self-striping, or even the pop-up yarns like Caron Cakes and Brene Pop-Ups and Medela Lion Brand, that's another good one. They're thin yarns. They're on the lower end, they're not so expensive, and they're still beautiful yarns. And once you put them together to 3 strands, working from one ball, it changes the texture of the yarn. It gets much softer and lush and poofier. Feels good. You take a scratchy kind of like economical yarn, and it will bump up into a really nice fluffy yarn. But say I only have, I don't know, a half a ball of this yarn, and I want to make this work into this to do a bigger project. Look how close that is. So just look at your yarns, and you don't know until you work them up. You really don't know, and that's kind of the fun part of it for me, is working up my different colors and seeing what they flesh out to be. So let's see, I covered. I'm going to give you another example real quick. This is the Mandela Lion Brand yarn, and it's a very, very thin, and you've got all different colors that it blocks out to. Stripes out in big blocks of color. When you pull it into 3 strands like that, it will be more like a variegated yarn. And I was making a baby hooded sweater for my neighbor who had a baby, and it was just coming out way too thin with this, way too thin. You know how thin it is? But when I went ahead and pulled it together in 3 strands, it was perfect. And not only that, colors weren't all over the place. So if you have a black one like a pop-up or a Caron Cake or a Mandela, or I think the other one I'm thinking of is called Paints something, those work up great for Navajo knitting and crocheting. It won't be so big, spread out blocks. You'll get several different colors together. So I hope you'll try Navajo knitting and crocheting, and what I just always called mixing my yarns. And again, thank you for watching, and have fun, bust up your yarn stash, don't spend a fortune on all that crazy. Oh, arm knitting. Arm knitting. If you're doing arm knitting and you're looking to go get the big bulky yarn, it's expensive. It's almost $9.99 for a small skein, $11.99 for the higher end ones. I've seen some for $20. Just do this. If you need macrame cord to do wall hangings, this stuff is perfect. Just loop it and play with it. What else does it work great for? That's it. That's it. So wall hangings, placemats, coasters. If it's not all acrylic, if you've got cotton, hot mats, you know, to put your food on or whatever, pot holders, those kind of things. So you can do all kinds of things by just mixing your yarns, and really have fun making this up again. I might keep this for a little scarf to block it. I don't know yet. Might make a headband out of it. I don't know. Yeah, that looks good, right? Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so I don't know. I'll play with it, but I hope you'll try this and get your yarn stash really busted up, and don't buy any yarn until you've used up your stash, and then you can save for all the yarn that's going on sale before November, because it's usually in the autumn that they put them on sale. Other thing it works up really great for is cotton, 100% cotton. So if you have Peaches and Cream, Aunt Lydia's, any of those, it works really good with those too. I'm going to work up a little hat tonight, because I need another hat, right? Okay, thanks everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.